Welcome to Eerie Shadow.
I was just trying to get home. The shift at the call center had dragged on longer than usual. I was exhausted, my mind hazy from hours of answering calls and staring at a monitor. The last thing I wanted was to be stranded in the middle of Manila at nearly midnight. But when I saw the last jeepney waiting at the terminal, I let out a sigh of relief. It was nearly empty, just a handful of passengers inside, all sitting eerily still. I climbed in, slumped onto a seat near the entrance, and closed my eyes for a moment. The jeepney rumbled to life, pulling out onto the dimly lit road. The city outside was quiet, too quiet for Manila. No honking, no shouting vendors, no blaring karaoke from open windows. Just the steady hum of the engine and the faint, rhythmic creak of the jeepney's suspension. Then I noticed it. No one was talking, no murmured conversations, no idle complaints about the heat or the traffic. I glanced around at the other passengers. They sat rigid, staring straight ahead. Their faces were eerily blank, eyes unblinking, hands resting limply on their laps. A cold unease prickled at my skin. I turned toward the driver. He was watching me in the rearview mirror. His knuckles were tight on the steering wheel, his face shadowed by the dim interior light. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at me, my stomach twisted. He whispered, almost too low to hear over the engine, "Hindi ka dapat nandito, you shouldn't be here." A chill ran down my spine. "Ano?" I asked, forcing out a shaky laugh. "Kuya, ano pong ibig sabihin niyo?" He didn't answer. His eyes darted between me and the road, his grip tightening. "Huwag kang gumalaw," he muttered. "Huwag kang lilingan, don't move, don't look back." My pulse hammered in my ears. My gaze flicked to the passengers again. Had they moved, their faces were still blank, but something about them felt wrong. The way their heads tilted slightly, as if they were listening. The air in the jeepney was stifling now, thick with something heavy and unseen. A sharp whisper brushed against my ear. Not from the driver, from behind me. "Tumingin ka, look." Every instinct screamed at me to stay still, to listen to the driver's warning. But the whisper, it had come from a passenger, one of the motionless figures behind me. The hairs on my neck stood on end. Slowly, too slowly, I turned my head, my breath caught in my throat. The passengers weren't sitting anymore. They were facing me, their blank, lifeless eyes bore into mine, their mouths hanging open in silent screams. Their limbs were twisted, their necks at unnatural angles, as if something had snapped them like twigs. A hand clamped down on my arm, the driver. "Huwag kang titingin," he hissed, yanking me forward. The jeepney swerved violently. The lights flickered. The passengers, those things, began to move, their limbs jerking unnaturally as they shifted closer. I could hear them breathing now, ragged and hollow, like wind whistling through an empty grave. "Kuya ano tu?" I choked out, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Sino sila. Hindi sila dapat nandito," the driver whispered. "At Hindi ka rin." They weren't supposed to be here, neither was I. The jeepney lurched to a stop. The doors slammed open and the driver shoved me out. I hit the pavement hard, scrambling to my feet as the jeepney's headlights flickered one last time. The driver met my eyes in the rearview mirror, his face grim. "Takbo, run," I turned and bolted. The jeepney roared to life behind me, its engine growling like a wounded beast. I risked one glance back, just one. The jeepney was driving away, but its passengers weren't inside anymore. They were standing in the road, watching me, their mouths still open. I ran until my lungs burned, until I reached the nearest lit street, where life still pulsed in the city. Gasping, I turned in every direction. The jeepney was gone. The road was empty, but the whisper still echoed in my ears. Tumingin Ka. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because if I don't, I'll forget again. Maybe because, deep down, I know you're already listening. The faint wind howls through the trees, distant creaks echo in the silence, and an old bell rings once before stopping abruptly. Somewhere deep in the woods of Illinois, there's a town that doesn't exist on any map. No roads lead to it, no records prove it was ever built, but it's there. And I wish to God I never found it. My handheld flashlight beam cuts through the dense fog, revealing the shadowy outlines of houses, their cracked facades overgrown with ivy. A once thriving town, Chesterville had flourished in the late 1800s, known for its booming coal industry and tight-knit community. But something happened, something unspoken. A darkness crept through its streets, and one night, the town ceased to exist. The only remnants are an old cemetery and the ruins of buildings that whisper of hauntings. Those who stumble upon Chesterville rarely leave unchanged, if they leave at all. We weren't supposed to be here. My brother Danny and I were just driving through Archer Avenue when the storm forced us off course. The GPS turned to static. The radio whispered unintelligible words. Then, through the sheets of rain, we saw him a lone figure on the side of the road, drenched and shivering. His clothes were old, outdated, like something out of a history book. He held out his thumb, and against my better judgment, I slowed the car. His eyes, dark and sunken, locked onto mine as he climbed into the back seat. "You're heading toward Chesterville, aren't you?" he murmured, more statement than question. I exchanged a glance with Danny. "Never heard of it." The man let out a breathy chuckle. "You have now." As we drove, I kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror. His lips barely moved when he spoke, but every word felt weighted, deliberate. "It's not a place you find. It's a place that finds you." His fingers traced something onto the fogged-up window, a number 312. Minutes later, the storm thickened, obscuring the road. The hitchhiker tensed. "You should turn back," he whispered, "before you can't." But then, the headlights illuminated a rusted, bullet-ridden sign barely hanging on a post. "Welcome to Chesterville, population 312. The numbers flickered, shifting from 312 to 0 before my phone screen glitched. The notebook is old, its leather cover worn and brittle. The pages, yellowed and frayed at the edges, smell of damp paper and something faintly metallic. My hands tremble as I turn the first page. The notebook is old, its leather cover worn and brittle. The pages, yellowed and frayed at the edges, smell of damp paper and something faintly metallic. My hands tremble as I turn the first page. Newspaper clipping the Chesterville Gazette. 1947, a devastating fire consumed Chesterville's steel factory last night, taking countless lives and leaving behind only questions. Officials attribute the tragedy to a gas leak, but inconsistencies emerge. Reports indicate the blaze erupted before any leak was detected. Witnesses recall workers marching, trance-like, into the inferno, murmuring in eerie unison. They didn't scream, one survivor whispered before falling into silence. The fire may have destroyed the factory, but the void it left in Chesterville is far more chilling. Journal entry handwritten. Uneven script. The factory fire wasn't an accident. The survivors are afraid to speak. Who or what told them to walk into the flames? Someone covered this up. Highway construction poster. State Development Department, 1960, 3 coming soon. Chesterville, interstate connection, boosting our economy and connecting us to the future. Handwritten note in red ink, jagged script. Frantic then, why did they stop? Workers quit without reason. Reports of voices beneath the soil. The foreman left this in his journal before he disappeared. Do not dig deeper. We are still here. Who is we? Photocopied yearbook page, Chesterville High. Class of 1982, image missing, scrawled handwriting in the margins. This page should not be blank. Where are they? Newspaper clipping, local report. 1980, 262 seniors gather for graduation night, then vanish by dawn. Every student from Chesterville High's graduating class was gone. Their cars remained untouched. Drinks sat unfinished. Their names vanished from official records. Chesterville began to wither soon after. Note uneven typewritten text, slightly smudged. No police reports. No missing persons files. It's as if they never existed, but someone remembers, don't they? Radio station transcript, WCRV late night broadcast, 1999. And now, our special segment, Calls from the Dead. Caller static heavy. They took my brother in 82. Now it's my turn. Host, who took? Silence. Then, garbled voices, whispering names. Station shut down that night. Tower still hums with static. Post-IT note stuck to the page, ink smeared. Chesterville is not gone. It is waiting. Local government notice, final evacuation, 2007 due to hazardous chemical exposure. Chesterville is under mandatory evacuation. Last message from Mayor, handwritten, barely legible. We should have left long ago. It's awake now. Drone footage notes timestamp. Undated years later, the town still stands. No looters, no decay, like it's waiting for something or someone. The pages tremble in my grip. My breath hitches. The ink smudges where my fingers press too hard. I should close the notebook. I should put it back. But I don't. Something tells me I was meant to find this. A creeping sense of familiarity washed over me, though I knew I had never been here before. Yet something about the way the town sat frozen in time, half-eaten meals on dining tables, toys abandoned mid-play, unsettled me. It was as if time had stopped, the air pressed against my skin, thick and watching. Danny grabbed my arm. We should go, he muttered, but I couldn't. I had to know what happened here. My boots scuffed against the cracked pavement as I walked forward, a rusted tricycle lying motionless in the middle of the road. A shadow darted past me, too quick to follow. The journal lay open in my hands, the hitchhiker's last entry scrawled across the page. If you're reading this, it's too late. It knows you now. I stumbled over something buried in the dirt, a newspaper, yellowed with age. My fingers trembled as I wiped the grime away, revealing the headline. Mass vanishing in Chesterville, all 312 residents gone in one night. Below it, a photo of the missing. My breath hitched. Among the faces was my own. A chill settled into my bones as the realization dawned. The town sign flickers again. The population changes from 0 to 1. When my neighbor Mrs. Smith asked me to feed her cat and parrot while she was away, I thought nothing of it. I mean, who doesn't help out a neighbor? We live in a small town where people still look out for each other. I'm Lilibeth, just an ordinary woman in her late 20s, juggling work, a small apartment, and too many books. Mrs. Smith was in her 70s, a sweet lady with a gentle voice and a soft smile. She always wore floral dresses and smelled faintly of lavender. I liked her, though we weren't particularly close. We chatted in passing about the weather, local news, gardening tips. So when she handed me a small brass key and instructions for feeding her pets, I didn't hesitate. "Just feed Whiskers and Polly twice a day," she said, her voice shaky but warm. "The food's in the kitchen cupboards. Polly likes to talk in the mornings, listen carefully." I smiled and nodded, slipping the key into my purse. "No problem, Mrs. Smith." The next morning, I found myself standing in front of the Smith house, key in hand. It was an old Victorian with peeling paint and overgrown ivy crawling up its walls. The porch creaked beneath my feet. The air smelled damp, a mix of wet wood and something faintly sour I couldn't place. I inserted the key into the lock. The door gave way with an eerie groan. Inside, silence swallowed me whole. No cheerful meowing or soft chirps greeted me. No sign of food bowls, no bird cage, no scratching or fluttering, just empty rooms. The house smelled of dust and stale air, as if untouched for months. I called out, "Mrs. Smith." "Whiskers." "Polly." My voice echoed unnervingly. I searched the kitchen. No cat food, no birdseed, no litter box. Just cold countertops and empty shelves. I checked the living room, where a large armchair sat facing a dusty window. A faded photograph on the mantel showed Mrs. Smith with a man and a young woman I assumed were family. No pets. My heart pounded. Maybe I was in the wrong house. I glanced at the key, then back around. That day, as I stepped out of the Smith house, an unsettling knot twisted deep in my stomach. The silence inside had felt unnatural, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone that wasn't there. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of dust and something faintly sour, almost like forgotten memories rotting in the corners. My hands still trembled slightly as I locked the door behind me. I tried to shake off the creeping dread, telling myself it was probably nothing. Maybe Mrs. Smith was testing me, or this was some strange, harmless prank. I pulled out my phone, fingers hesitating before typing a message to her. "I don't see any pets or food here. Did I get the right house?" The seconds stretched long, the quiet buzzing of the empty street around me amplified in the stillness. Her reply came almost instantly, calm and direct, but somehow colder than her usual voice. "Yes, Lilibeth, that's the house. Just feed them, please." I stared at the screen, swallowing a lump of unease. There was no warmth, no explanation, just a command that felt like it came from somewhere far away. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and forced my footsteps to quicken. I told myself not to think about it, but the silence of that empty house echoed in my mind, relentless and unanswered. The next day, I found myself standing again at the doorstep, the key cold and heavy in my palm, like a weight I couldn't shrug off. The sky was overcast, casting a dull gray light that seeped through the gnarled branches of the overgrown trees surrounding the house, making long shadows stretch across the cracked pavement like dark fingers. When I stepped inside, the familiar oppressive stillness wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. There were no welcoming meows or chirps, no hint of life anywhere. But then, something shifted, a soft rustling sound, delicate and faint, like feathers brushing against old wooden floorboards. My breath caught in my throat. I stood frozen, every nerve screaming alert. The air seemed to grow colder, heavier, and the shadows in the corners of the rooms deepened, pulsing like living things watching from the darkness. Drawn toward the sound, I climbed the creaking stairs, each step echoing too loudly in the silence. At the top, a small sunroom greeted me, its large windows smeared with grime and streaked by rain, filtering the pale daylight into eerie shafts that illuminated the dust dancing in the stagnant air. There, on a crooked perch by the window, sat an empty bird cage, its metal bars rusted and cold. Next to it, a cracked water dish sat bone dry, a testament to long neglect. No bird. A faint, rhythmic tapping began, a slow, deliberate beat that sounded almost like Morse code, tapping against the wooden window frame. My skin prickled as a chill raced down my spine. Then, soft and low, a voice broke the silence, something not quite human, a rasp between a whisper and a croak. "Feed me." I spun around, heart hammering against my ribs, but no one was there. Just the empty room, the stale air, and the cold, watching shadows. That night, lying alone in my tiny apartment, I couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that something was very wrong. The house had been so still, too still, and yet I was certain I'd heard that faint tapping, that chilling whisper. Was my mind playing tricks on me? Maybe the stress from work, the long hours, the loneliness of being in a new city had finally started to crack my sanity. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding in the quiet, every shadow in the room seeming to twitch with unseen movement. The silence wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and cold. I needed to talk to someone. So I called Anna. She was my oldest friend, the one who always grounded me when I felt lost. When I told her everything, the empty house, the mysterious noises, the voice that seemed to beg for food, her laughter came through the phone, light but uncertain. "Maybe it's a spirit," she said half-jokingly. I forced a laugh, trying to match her lightness, but inside I felt a deep pit of unease grow heavier. Was it really a spirit? Or something else, something darker? That question haunted me through the night, and no matter how tightly I shut my eyes, sleep slipped away, leaving me trapped with the growing dread. The next morning, I stood on the porch of the Smith house, the key cold in my palm, my skin prickling with anticipation and fear. As I stepped inside, my eyes immediately caught a note on the kitchen table, folded carefully as if waiting just for me. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably Mrs. Smith's. "Thank you for feeding Polly. Has she said anything strange?" The name sent a sudden chill rushing through my veins. Polly. The very name seemed to echo in the hollow spaces of the house. I glanced toward the bird cage upstairs, where yesterday only silence had greeted me. My heart tightened. Suddenly, from somewhere deep inside the walls, a sharp, broken squawk shattered the silence. The sound was jagged, ragged, like an old vinyl record skipping, crackling with static. It made my blood run cold. Then, carried on that eerie noise, a voice whispered, cracked and desperate, "Help me, Lilibeth." The sound wasn't quite human, but it was unmistakably a plea. I spun around, searching the dimly lit room, but there was no one there, just the weight of silence pressing back at me. My breath caught, my limbs trembling. It felt as though the walls themselves were watching, waiting, determined to understand what I was caught up in. I spent hours digging into the Smith family's past, scrolling through dusty archives, old newspaper clippings, and neighborhood gossip forums. The story that emerged was one of loss, and heartbreak. Years ago, Mrs. Smith's husband had died suddenly, leaving her alone with a daughter who eventually left town, disappearing from the neighborhood altogether. Neighbors whispered about how the house had fallen silent afterward. No signs of pets, no bowls, no cages, just the empty shell of what used to be a home. Some said Mrs. Smith had begun talking to herself, claiming her animals were still there, even as the house grew colder and darker. No one saw the cat or the bird anymore. The thought chilled me. Had I been feeding shadows, caring for ghosts? The line between reality and nightmare blurred so much that I didn't know which side I was on anymore. It felt like I had been drawn into a story not meant for the living, a place where grief and memory clung to the walls, where something unseen waited silently in the shadows. The house wasn't just empty, it was alive with loss. The day I decided to return for the last time, a thick, suffocating fog clung to the street like a shroud. Even before I stepped inside, a chill ran deep into my bones, colder than any autumn air I'd felt before. The front door creaked open with an eerie groan, as if protesting my presence. Inside, the house was transformed. The shadows seemed to pulse and flicker against the peeling wallpaper, almost like living things breathing just beneath the surface. Every step I took echoed through the empty halls, but the silence was deceptive. Whispers floated around me, barely audible, yet unmistakably real. Faint voices called my name, twisting and curling around the edges of my sanity. I froze, heart hammering, senses screaming to run, but my feet stayed rooted to the floor. On the kitchen table lay the key I had brought with me, cold and heavy in the dim light. I set it down gently, a final farewell to whatever had drawn me here. As I turned to leave, a sudden prickling sensation crawled across my skin, like hundreds of unseen eyes boring into me from every dark corner. The air thickened with something unseen, watching, waiting. I didn't look back. I stepped outside, the door closing softly behind me, but the feeling lingered, an invisible presence clinging to me as I walked away into the fading light. Days later, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Smith. Her voice came through like a distant echo, soft, polite, but carrying an unplaceable hollowness that sent a shiver down my spine. "Thank you, Lilibeth," she said, almost whispering, as if the words themselves were fragile and dangerous. Then came the question I had been dreading. "Did Polly say anything to you?" I hesitated, the memory of that broken voice pressing against my throat. "No," I answered quietly, my voice barely steady. On the other end, a sigh escaped her lips, a sound filled with relief and something darker, something resigned. "I'm glad," she murmured. "Some things are better left unheard." The call ended, but her words echoed in my mind, wrapping around me like a warning I couldn't ignore. Since that last visit, I've stayed away from the Smith house and the strange requests that came with it. But sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment late at night, I catch myself hearing little things, like the faint tapping of nails against a window pane or the soft creak of a door I'm sure I locked. It's never anything solid, never enough to point to an actual cause. Just little sounds that make my skin crawl and my heart skip a beat. I've tried telling myself it's my imagination, stress from work, loneliness, or maybe the creaks and groans that old buildings make when the wind blows. But those quiet moments still catch me off guard. And sometimes, I swear, I hear a faint, hushed voice muttering something I can't quite make out. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me, trying to find meaning in silence. Whatever it is, it's a reminder that sometimes the things we think are gone aren't really gone at all. And sometimes the strangest, most unsettling experiences come not from ghosts or spirits, but from the echoes left behind in empty spaces, the unresolved parts of people's lives that linger long after they've moved on. I'll never feed Polly, but I'll never forget the way that house felt, the cold, the silence, and the weight of something watching just out of sight. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was just another glitch, one of those weird moments you get when your phone decides to act up. It wasn't the first time this T app had played tricks on me, but it was the first time I felt genuinely unsettled. My name is Isabel, and like most 20-somethings, I spend more time scrolling through the T app than I probably should. Between work, my semi-quiet apartment, and the few friends I keep in touch with, it was a way to kill time. I'd scroll, laugh, post a random thought now and then, and forget about it. Social media had never felt dangerous to me. It was just a distraction, an escape. But that night, it wasn't an escape. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment in a part of the city where the streetlights flicker and the wind howls through the trees on the edge of the block. It's not exactly a place you'd call glamorous, but it's comfortable. I've lived here for about a year now, ever since moving out of my parents' house. I work remotely, so I don't have a huge social circle. Most of my interactions happen online, either with clients or through social media. My apartment is mostly quiet, except for the occasional sounds of people walking outside or the hum of my refrigerator. It's not the type of place where things go bump in the night, and I liked it that way. Peaceful, safe, but on this particular evening, that quiet was disturbed. I had just returned home after another long day of staring at a screen and tapping away at my laptop. As usual, I plopped onto the couch, phone in hand, and started scrolling through T platform. It had become a habit: watch a few funny videos, check my notifications, and maybe post something about how I was feeling that day. I had seen people trying this new filter, the one where you look into the camera and see something different behind you. At first, I thought it was dumb, another viral gimmick, another filter that made you look like an animated character or an alien. But that evening, boredom got the best of me, and I decided to try it for myself. Why not, right? Something simple to kill the time. I held up my phone, activated the filter, and tilted my head slightly as I set up the camera to get the perfect angle. The instructions were simple. Look into the camera, stay still, and see what appears behind you. A laugh from the app's sound effects filled my ears. It was innocent enough. Almost funny. At first, nothing happened. The background of my apartment was in perfect view: the cozy couch, the bookshelves stacked with unread novels, and the kitchen in the corner with the faint hum of the microwave in the background. I waited for a moment, checking the camera's reflection in the screen, expecting something silly to pop up behind me, and then I saw it, a figure, standing just beyond my shoulder. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, or that the filter was malfunctioning. But the longer I stared, the more I realized something was wrong. The figure wasn't just a shape. It was a man who was standing perfectly still, facing me, but with his head tilted unnaturally backward, so much so that I could see the whites of his eyes. His lips curled into a wide, unsettling grin. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and even adjusted the phone's camera angle. I thought maybe the filter was bugged. I moved a little, trying to shift the image, but he was still there, standing behind me. A sudden rush of heat spread through my body, and I pulled the phone away from my face, staring at it with a mix of disbelief and confusion. The app was glitching. That had to be it. But as I lowered the phone, I noticed something else, something even more disturbing. The grinning man was still there, only now he was clearly visible without the filter. He was in my apartment. A cold wave of dread washed over me. My hands shook as I glanced around. The living room was quiet, nothing out of place, except for the figure behind me. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching, grinning. His grin seemed to stretch wider with each passing second, as if it was mocking me. I could feel my pulse quicken, my throat tightening. "Okay, stop playing," I said aloud, my voice trembling more than I intended. I figured if I laughed it off, maybe it would just go away. But the man didn't go away. Instead, he stepped closer, his grin widening impossibly as if to consume his entire face. I didn't know how, but I felt it. Something was wrong. He was real. He wasn't part of the app. This was something else. I didn't know how to react. I was paralyzed, staring at the screen, and yet, in the back of my mind, a voice whispered, "He's not supposed to be here." My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the phone screen. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I wanted to look away, to run, to scream, but my body refused to obey. All I could do was stare at that grin, that wide, terrifying grin. It was so unnatural, so out of place, that I thought I was losing my mind. I slowly turned my head, instinctively expecting the figure to vanish in the way that things usually did when you weren't looking directly at them. But when I turned, I saw nothing. My apartment was quiet, calm, normal. I rushed to look back at the screen. The man was still there. I froze, unable to move. His eyes locked onto mine, or at least I thought they did. It felt like his gaze pierced through me, beyond the phone, into something deeper. He was standing too close now, his body just behind my shoulder, and yet the apartment around me remained unchanged. The rest of the room felt distant, like I was floating in some kind of bubble that separated me from everything around me. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I lowered the phone. "This isn't real," I told myself, trying to ground myself in the logic of the moment. "It's just a glitch, a weird trick of the filter." But when I glanced around the room, my breath caught in my throat. The air felt cold. The soft hum of the fridge in the kitchen was the only sound, but there was something else. A whisper, so faint I wasn't sure if it was real, seemed to brush against my ear. My skin crawled. I immediately turned back to the phone screen. The man was still there, his grin wider now, if that was even possible. It stretched impossibly, unnervingly. I couldn't help myself. I stepped back from the phone, my legs feeling like jelly as I tripped over my own feet and fell onto the couch. My hands gripped the phone so tightly, I thought I might break it, but I didn't dare let go. I kept my eyes trained on the screen. Should I call someone? I thought, my mind racing for some kind of explanation. But who do you even call for this? I tried to lift the phone away again, desperate to look away, but when I did, I saw something even worse. The lights flickered above me like a bad omen, and I heard a sharp crack from the ceiling light. I rushed to switch on every other light in the room. Nothing. The flickering stopped, but the room felt different now, darker somehow, even with the lights on. I looked back at the screen. The man, he was still grinning. I can't explain how long I sat there, staring at that damn screen. Time seemed to stretch into something I couldn't grasp. I don't remember if I even blinked. Every time I thought about looking away, about putting my phone down, my body wouldn't allow it. I was paralyzed by this feeling I couldn't place. Terror, yes, but also something else. Something worse. That was when I noticed it. The room, the man behind me, he was closer. I wasn't imagining it. He was stepping forward. And with every step he took in that virtual space, the reality of my apartment grew more distant, as if the walls were closing in on me. His smile didn't fade. It only grew impossibly wide. And still, he didn't move, but his presence loomed over me in a way that made me feel like I was suffocating. I couldn't look away. I felt like if I did, I would disappear into the darkness that seemed to be creeping along the edges of my apartment. This isn't happening, I told myself again. It's just a filter. It's just a glitch. I set the phone down, as if doing so would rid me of whatever strange force had a hold of me. But as soon as I looked away, I saw the shadows in the room. They weren't normal shadows, though. They seemed to shift, twisting around the furniture like they had a life of their own. The kitchen light above flickered again. But this time, it wasn't the bulb. It felt like something had moved. I turned my head to look, my pulse quickening. No one was there. Just the empty space I'd known for so long. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the room with me. Someone or something. Then it happened. The phone screen suddenly went black. I picked it up again, desperately pressing the screen to wake it. Nothing. Panic shot through me as I frantically pressed the power button. I needed to see the man. I needed to know he was just a trick, just a mistake. The screen blinked to life again, but the man was gone. I felt a moment of relief. For about a second, I almost laughed. But that relief was short-lived. Just as quickly as he had disappeared, I heard it. A whisper, not from the phone this time, but from somewhere in the room. Close, too close. Look behind you. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance, my breath hitching in my throat, but the room was empty, completely empty. I was alone. Except for the feeling that I wasn't. I turned back to the phone, my hands now shaking uncontrollably. The screen was still dark. I tried to swipe again, but my fingers were numb. When I finally managed to pull up the app once more, the man was there. But this time, he wasn't just in the filter. He was in my room. I couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt like it had thickened, pressing in on me from all sides. The once comfortable space I had known for so long had become a prison, its walls closing in around me. I should have turned off the phone, should have tried to pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't. Something held me there, a force I couldn't explain. The man was standing in the corner of the screen, right where I had been sitting moments before. His grin hadn't changed, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted. It felt colder, like the temperature had dropped several degrees. I glanced toward the window, where the streetlights outside flickered faintly through the curtains. The silence was suffocating, and then the lights went out. It wasn't a flicker this time. The entire apartment was plunged into darkness. My phone screen was the only source of light, but even it felt distant now, as if the darkness had swallowed everything around me. Not now. Not now, please. I fumbled for my phone, my hands still trembling violently. When I turned on the flashlight, the small beam of light barely cut through the darkness. I tried the switches. Nothing. The room remained as black as night. I stood up, the air heavy with something I couldn't place, my every movement slow and deliberate, as though the darkness was dragging me down. I couldn't stay here. I needed to leave. But something stopped me, my phone. I couldn't leave it. Not with that thing still on the screen. I couldn't bring myself to look at it again. I thought, just for a moment, that I might be able to escape this if I closed my eyes long enough. If I ignored it, it might go away. I turned toward the door. My feet shuffled across the carpet, the only sound in the room my own breath, shallow and rapid. And then I heard it, the voice so faint, so soft it almost seemed to be in my head, whispered again, the same words, "Look behind you." I froze. My hands shook as I reached for the doorknob. But I couldn't move. My body was locked in place, caught between wanting to run and the paralyzing fear that if I did, I might make everything worse. I dared a glance behind me, my heart thumping violently against my chest. There was nothing. But the room felt wrong. The shadows didn't sit right. The space behind me, once a familiar part of my home, now felt alien, foreign. Like someone had stretched it too thin, distorting the angles, warping the walls. And then I saw it. In the corner of the room, right by the window, the figure was there. The man, he wasn't just a digital illusion now. He was standing in the corner, tall and impossibly thin, his wide grin stretched unnaturally across his face. I couldn't tell if his teeth were yellow or if the shadows had made them look like that, but I could see them clearly. Sharp, jagged, too sharp. His eyes, those dark, hollow eyes, bore into me. I felt them press against my skull, making my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to shout, to do something. But my body refused. All I could do was stand there, frozen, my eyes locked onto his. The lights flickered again. The harsh white light that once illuminated my apartment suddenly snapped back on. But it was distorted, like the bulb was failing, struggling to push through the dark, oppressive air. The corners of the room remained too dark, too cold. I felt suffocated, trapped. This isn't real. This isn't real. The mantra ran through my mind like a prayer, but the fear crawling up my spine told me otherwise. The phone buzzed in my hand, its sudden vibration almost making me drop it. I raised it up, staring at the screen. My eyes widened. The man was gone from the filter. I blinked. It was still on the screen, the same filter, but the man. The real man, the one I'd seen standing in the corner, had vanished. The tension in the air didn't ease, though. It only grew tighter. The shadows seemed to creep closer, pulling at me. The silence, too, was unnerving, too quiet, too still. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I'm just too stressed. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't a dream. This was happening. The buzz in my pocket broke my train of thought. My heart skipped a beat. Who would be texting me at this hour? I pulled out my phone. It was a message. From an unknown number, my finger hovered over the screen as I read the message. I saw you. That was all it said. I couldn't breathe. The air around me was suffocating, pressing in from all sides like an invisible force determined to crush me. That message, "I saw you," kept replaying in my mind like a broken record, each word stabbing into my skull with more intensity. I saw you. I tried to steady my hands to make sense of it, but nothing made sense anymore. The room felt cold again, the shadows too deep, too wrong. I grabbed my phone, desperate for some sort of rational explanation. Maybe it was a prank, just a cruel joke. Someone had hacked my app. Someone who had seen my face through the filter and was now playing some twisted game. But as I scrolled through my messages, my heart sank. The message was from the unknown number, and there was no name attached, just a string of numbers. It wasn't like a normal spam text, though. The tone of the message was direct, personal. As though someone had been watching me, I tried to call the number, but it went straight to voicemail. No surprise there. Whoever sent it didn't want to talk. My fingers shook as I looked through my contacts, trying to find someone, anyone, who could help. My best friend Rachel came to mind. I needed to talk to her to explain what had happened. Maybe she could make sense of this, or at least tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I dialed her number quickly, holding my breath as it rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3, hello? Her voice was groggy, like I had woken her up. I didn't care. I needed her now more than ever. Rachel, I need help, I whispered, my voice quivering. Belle, what's wrong? You sound freaked out. I explained everything, the face filter, the grin, the message. She listened silently, her quiet murmurs of reassurance doing little to ease my panic. After a long pause, she spoke. Belle, you've got to be careful with stuff like that. It's a filter. It's just a glitch or something. People mess with those apps all the time. Her tone was calm, almost dismissive, but I could hear the concern underlying her words. You're freaking yourself out. Just turn off the phone, go to bed, and forget about it. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the man's grin wouldn't leave my mind, and the way he had appeared in the corner of the room, that wasn't a glitch. That wasn't normal. I could hear the tremor in my voice as I tried to explain again, but Rachel cut me off. Belle, I swear, it's just a prank. Someone's messing with you. I didn't know if she believed me. I didn't even know if I believed me anymore. But one thing was for sure, I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I couldn't. Not while that thing was out there. All right, Rachel said, sensing my desperation. Why don't you try a little experiment? Do the filter again. See if it happens again. The suggestion made me feel sick, but it was the only option I had. I wasn't going to let myself be the crazy girl who swore a man was in her house without any proof. I opened the T app again, my hands unsteady. The filter was still there, just like before, waiting. I tapped it and held the phone up, positioning it exactly like I had the first time, hoping, praying that nothing would happen. But deep down, I knew I was being foolish. The grin. That damn grin. It was there again, but this time it was different. The man didn't appear in the corner of the screen. No, now he was closer. His face was stretched, contorted, like the filter had manipulated him even more. His eyes were wide, too wide, and his mouth opened slightly, stretching unnaturally. His grin was impossibly large. And in that moment, I saw it, his reflection. There was no one behind me, but the reflection was standing just inches away, just behind my shoulder. I dropped the phone in a fit of panic, and it hit the carpet with a thud. My hands were slick with sweat, my breath shallow and ragged. I couldn't focus. The room felt like it was closing in on me again, the walls warping, the shadows lengthening. I dared not turn around. I knew it was there. He was there, the man, and I wasn't alone anymore. I couldn't breathe. The air had turned dense, like I was trapped underwater. It was hard to think, hard to process what had just happened. My mind was struggling to catch up with the terror I was feeling, and the phone on the floor felt like the only tangible thing left in the room. I had to make sure. I had to see it again, confirm what I was seeing, or else I'd go crazy. I slowly, carefully, picked up the phone. I was afraid of looking at it, afraid of what I might find. But it was the only thing that made sense now. I opened T-App again, hands trembling, and brought the camera to my face. My reflection stared back at me, pale and panicked. I tapped the filter again. This time, I expected the man to appear, but there was nothing. Nothing, just me. My heart beat louder in my chest, each second dragging me deeper into confusion. Maybe it was over. Maybe it was just some weird glitch, a trick of the light, a bad app. Maybe. I was just losing my mind. The relief hit me like a wave. It's over, I thought. I'm safe. But then the lights flickered. It was subtle at first, a faint buzz, and then the lights went out again, this time for much longer. My phone's flashlight was all that kept the room from swallowing me whole. And when the light came back, the man was standing right in front of me, grinning, not in the corner of the room, not on the phone screen. He was there. In my room, I screamed, but no sound came out. The phone slipped from my hands and the room spun. He took a step toward me. One step, then another. My legs felt like jelly, but somehow I managed to move. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I saw you." His voice echoed in my head, but it wasn't a whisper this time. It was clear, sharp, and it wasn't coming from the phone anymore. The room was so quiet now that I could hear my own pulse in my ears. My thoughts were muddled, every rational explanation drowning beneath waves of fear. I felt the cold air, sharp as ice, wash over my skin as if it was not just the temperature dropping, but the very space around me turning hostile. I could hear the floor creak behind me, but when I turned, there was nothing, just empty space. Just the shadows, those same oppressive shadows that clung to the corners of the room. I stumbled backward, my hands reaching out for anything to steady myself. My eyes kept darting back to the figure, but each time I looked, it wasn't there. It felt like it was there, but I couldn't pinpoint where. I couldn't explain it anymore. The filter, the message, the man, none of it made sense. All I knew was that I was being haunted. But by what? I collapsed onto the floor, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the madness. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe I had just imagined it all. But no. No, I couldn't be imagining this. It was too real. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the empty space where the figure had once stood. Maybe hours, maybe minutes, it didn't matter. The darkness had consumed everything in its path, and I was still there, trapped in my own fear, trying to figure out what had happened. And then my phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't even look at the screen. I knew what it would say. "I saw you." But when I opened it, there was no message. Just the picture of my face. Staring back at me, the phone in my hand trembled uncontrollably. I couldn't stop my hands from shaking, the tremors spreading up my arms as I tried to focus on the screen. But it was impossible. The picture of my face was still there, frozen, staring back at me, lifeless. My reflection, it had to be a trick, right? Some sick prank. Something that had gone too far. I couldn't let myself believe that the man I had seen earlier, standing in my room, was real. No, that was just fear. That was just the terror twisting my perception. It couldn't be real. I took in a sharp breath, trying to steady myself. I turned the phone over, letting it fall onto the couch, and rubbed my eyes. I didn't know what to do next. I wasn't going to get any answers by sitting here. I had to figure out how this was happening. Was I being targeted by someone? Was it possible that the filter was glitching in some horrifying way? But none of those explanations made sense. The way he grinned at me, the way he moved, it felt real. I needed help. I needed someone who knew more about this kind of thing. I reached for my computer, fingers still shaking. My brain was fogged, like I was swimming in a pool of dread and disbelief. I typed into the search bar, T-app face filter haunting. At first, the results were what I expected, articles about viral challenges, app bugs, and how face filters sometimes caused creepy glitches. But as I scrolled deeper, I found something that stopped me cold. A forum thread titled, "Don't use T-app's new face filter, it's not a joke." My heart skipped. I clicked on the link, desperate for answers. The thread was buried in the middle of a forum about weird phenomena in social media. Most of the posts were scattered with half-finished thoughts, people debating the weird coincidences or glitches they'd seen. But one post stood out. "You're not imagining it." The words were simple, but they chilled me to the bone. The poster continued. I tried it too. At first, it was fun, just a silly filter. But then, it wasn't. The man in the background, the one who smiled, it's not a glitch. It's not a bug. He knows where you are. He watches you through the app, through the filter. He follows you. Every time you use it, he gets closer. And he's not going to leave. I read the post several times, my stomach twisting in knots. I scrolled down further. More people had commented, each one sharing a similar experience. A figure standing behind them in the filter, grinning. A shadow moving in their peripheral vision. At least 5 different users had shared stories of something following them after they used the filter. One even claimed to have found a hidden message. "I see you now," in their notifications, right before their lights went out. I closed my computer, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. I wasn't imagining it. This thing, whatever it was real. Suddenly, the lights flickered. My heart stopped. I froze, holding my breath. Not again, not now. I stood up from the couch, my legs unsteady. My hand reached for the light switch, but it didn't help. The lights went out completely. I grabbed my phone, using the dim glow from the screen to illuminate the room. It was too quiet, too still. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping loudly in my ears, but nothing else. No creaks from the house, no hum from the fridge, nothing. I turned the phone around, checking the front-facing camera, half expecting to see him again. But there was nothing. Just my face, pale and terrified. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear my vision. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe the stress had finally gotten to me. But then I heard it, a slow, deliberate creak of the floorboard. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. There, in the darkened corner of the room, I saw it. The same figure. That twisted grin. The man was standing there, his eyes hollow and black. The grin stretched too wide, his teeth sharp and unsettling in the dim light. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick and suffocating, pressing against my chest. I took a step back, then another, my heart slamming in my chest. I whispered to myself, "This isn't real, this isn't real." But my legs were shaking too much, my thoughts too scattered to make sense of anything. The figure moved slowly, deliberately, step by step. He didn't make a sound. His presence was the only thing that spoke. I ran for the door. My mind screamed at me to get out, to leave, but the door wouldn't open. The handle wouldn't turn. My hands were slick with sweat as I fumbled with it, trying to force it open. In the reflection of the glass, I saw him again. He was closer. My vision blurred as I pounded against the door, my voice breaking as I screamed. But my cries only echoed back at me, swallowed by the empty house. I could feel him, right behind me, his cold breath on the back of my neck. The door finally gave way with a loud creak. I pushed it open and bolted outside, gasping for air, my chest heaving with panic. The night air hit me like a shock, the coolness trying to calm me, but I couldn't focus. I didn't know where to go, what to do. I stumbled down the steps and into the yard, but my phone buzzed again. I couldn't look at it. I couldn't go back inside. But something urged me, something forced my fingers to swipe the screen. "You're not safe. You'll never be safe again." The text was clear, the words ringing through my mind like a death knell. The screen flickered as the message disappeared. And then, in the reflection of my phone, I saw him again, his grin stretching wider than ever just behind me. I ran. I didn't stop running until my legs ached, until I was gasping for breath, my heart threatening to burst out of my chest. I don't know how far I went, but I didn't care. I just needed to escape. I found myself standing in a park several miles away, the city lights flickering in the distance. But I didn't feel safe. My phone buzzed again, the screen flashing as I held it in my trembling hands. I opened it. This time, there was no message, no words, just a picture. The same picture of my face. But now, the figure was standing behind me for good. The man was always going to be there, watching, waiting, and I couldn't escape him. There is no escaping something that knows you that well. And the worst part, he knew where I was now. And he was never letting go. I don't know where I am anymore. I don't know if this is real or just another part of the nightmare. The man hasn't left. He's still with me, lurking just behind me, grinning that awful, twisted grin. I can hear him, even when I can't see him. The darkness is his domain, and it's swallowing me whole. I tried to tell people. I tried to make them understand what happened, but no one believes me. Everyone thinks it's just another one of those internet hoaxes, a viral story meant to grab attention. No one understands what it's like to feel someone watching you when no one's there. No one knows what it's like to see that grin in every reflection, in every darkened corner. I've always hated silence, not because it's peaceful, but because it gives everything else a stage. After my mother died, I moved into this apartment because it was cheap, close to the hospital, and small enough to ignore. One long hallway connects the bedroom to the living room and kitchen. Everything creaks, the fridge hums, the walls groan when the pipes shift, but otherwise, it's dead quiet. That's how I knew the sobbing didn't belong. The first night I heard it, I was lying in bed. I'd just finished another night shift and taken the sleeping pills that hadn't worked in weeks. The clock ticked on the wall. The bedroom was still except for the fans spinning overhead. And then, the sobbing began, soft at first. A woman's voice from the end of the hall, muffled, ragged, familiar. I sat up too fast, heart pounding, drug hazy. I thought maybe a neighbor left a TV on. But when I crept toward the door, every board under my foot whispered back at me. The sound stopped before I reached the end of the hallway. No one was there. I wish I could say I dismissed it as a dream. But I didn't, because I knew that cry. I'd made that sound 100 times. It was the sound I made when I thought my mother couldn't hear me. Bent over her hospice bed, forehead to her sheets, a sound of hopeless, exhausted guilt. It didn't come again for a few nights. Then, one Thursday, it started again. Same hour, same hallway, same exact sound. Only this time, it didn't stop when I stood up. It matched me, sob for sob. By the end of week 2, I'd stopped trying to sleep at night. I drank black tea, paced the kitchen, sat on the floor staring down the hallway. The peeling wallpaper reminded me of the old house. So did the mildew smell that drifted in from the bathroom tiles. I hadn't used lavender lotion since Mom died, but sometimes it wafted from the bedroom door like she was standing on the other side. Sleep deprivation makes things worse. You forget what's real and what's memory. But I never cried during those nights. I stayed silent. So when the sobbing returned, louder, harsher, I knew it wasn't me. But it was using my voice. It always came from the end of the hallway, just past the flickering ceiling light. I thought about asking a neighbor, but I'd barely seen anyone in this building. Just a man 2 doors down who always seemed to leave just as I returned. He once nodded politely. That's it. One night, I stayed seated on the couch and just listened. The sobs echoed faintly, then escalated, like something was frustrated I wasn't reacting. Then came the first whisper, "You never said goodbye." It was my voice, Exactly, it didn't sound like a ghost. No rattling chains, no distant echo. It was like hearing myself through a thick wall, but I wasn't speaking. I gripped the mug in my hands so hard I chipped the rim against my teeth. The voice cried again. "You left her alone." I whispered back, unsure why. "No, I stayed. I stayed every night." But the voice didn't answer. It just sobbed harder. The next day, I asked the landlord if anyone had complained about sounds from my unit. He raised an eyebrow and said, "We only have 2 tenants on your floor, and the other one's an old man who barely speaks English. If you're hearing things, maybe you should see someone." I didn't blame him. I looked like shit. Pale, eyes bagged. I'd started drinking coffee instead of eating. That night, I stood in front of the hallway, watching. At 2:17 a.m., right on time, the sobbing began again. But this time, I saw something. A figure at the end of the hall, rocking. Hunched over. Hair tied in a messy bun like mine, wearing my old maroon sweater. The one I'd lost during a double shift a month ago. It sat in the shadows, rocking. Sobbing, I whispered, "Who are you?" The figure paused, turned slightly, and whispered, "You." I didn't run. I couldn't. I blinked, and the figure was gone. Just hallway. Just wallpaper. Just that heavy silence again. But the tears were real, on my cheeks, warm and slow. And I hadn't noticed them until that moment. I started setting up my phone camera at night, pointing it down the hallway. Each time I reviewed the footage, it showed nothing, except once, in a single frame, 2:17 a.m. A blur, not motion. Shape. Like something had stepped into view for just a fraction of a second. I stared at that frame for hours, convinced I could make out the slope of my shoulders. The cut of my hair. I deleted the video. I didn't want proof. I just wanted it to stop. That final night, I didn't bother trying to sleep. I sat on the floor at the edge of the hallway, knees pulled to my chest, eyes fixed on the spot where the figure always appeared. I hadn't cried in days, not properly. Just stared, gone blank, the kind of tired that even sleep couldn't fix. But the sobbing came again. This time, it wasn't distant. It was right beside me. I turned my head. There was no one there, but I heard the sobbing anyway. The exact same cadence as before. Each hitch in the throat. Each whispered gasp. My voice, except it didn't feel like me anymore. I stood up slowly and walked toward the bedroom mirror, just to see myself, to remind myself I was still real. But as I stared into it, something didn't look right. I was too pale. My lips trembled. I couldn't meet my own eyes, and then I heard it again. "You never said goodbye." I didn't flinch this time. I whispered back. I didn't know how. That night, I called in sick for the first time in years. Sat at the table, opened my mother's last voicemail, played it on loop, just her voice saying, "Don't forget to take care of yourself, okay? You always forget that." I let myself cry for real, not in silence, not into my pillow like I used to when she was sick. And I realized something. The sobbing hadn't been coming from the hallway. It had been coming from me. The apartment wasn't haunted. I was, not by a ghost, by everything I hadn't let myself feel, by every hour I'd replayed what I could have done better, by the guilt I fed every time I looked in the mirror and saw her face in mine. A week later, I made an appointment with someone, a grief counselor. The hallway's still long, still creaky, still quiet, but the sobbing hasn't returned. Or maybe it has. Maybe I just finally understand where it was coming from. I wasn't being haunted by a doppelganger. I was just finally hearing myself. And now, for the first time since she died, I'm listening. I don't believe in ghosts. I've said that out loud at least twice a day since I moved in. Maybe if I say it enough, I'll believe it. The house is quiet tonight, the kind of quiet that settles into your joints. A soft hum from the refrigerator, the tick of the living room clock, and the occasional whisper of wind against the old siding. It's a one-story bungalow, plain and unfussy, the kind of place someone lives in while trying not to think too hard, which is exactly why I bought it. After the divorce, I wanted space, solitude, just me, my work, and the slow task of rebuilding. My ex used to call me rational to a fault, like it was some kind of insult, but I wear it like armor now. I need logic more than ever, especially with the things I've been hearing. It started on my second night. I just finished a freelance gig, copy for some lifestyle brand that wants to be spiritual but sexy. I was lying on the couch with a cup of peppermint tea, trying to ignore the ache behind my eyes, when I heard it tap, tap, drag directly above me. The living room ceiling creaked slowly, methodically, as if someone were pacing. I froze, mug halfway to my lips. The ceiling here is low, maybe 8 feet, yellowing slightly with age. A faint crack runs along it, jagged and dusty, like the house tried to split itself open long ago and gave up halfway. I stared at that crack for a long time. Then I laughed. Settling, I said aloud. Old houses creak. And that was that. I went back to sipping tea. The footsteps didn't come again that night. Day 4, it was a Monday. I'd barely slept. I kept dreaming I was lying in bed while someone stood over me, breathing. That afternoon, I found myself staring up at the ceiling again. There's no attic access inside the house. I checked when I moved in, looked through every closet, every hatch, every weird corner. No pull cord, no hidden panel. There's a small, ancient-looking vent near the kitchen that puffs out stale air when the heat kicks in, but that's it. Still, I grabbed a flashlight, stood on the dining chair, and ran my hand along the top molding by the crack. The drywall flaked at my touch, just dust and age, no gaps, no entry points. That night it came back thud, thud, drag heavier now, slow, like someone with a limp. I turned off the TV, holding the remote like a weapon. The screen buzzed with static for half a second before cutting to black. I sat in the dark, ears straining, gruone, the beam above my head bent audibly. I don't scare easily. But I felt something then, not fear exactly. Dread, maybe. A deep, low ache in the chest that whispered, "You shouldn't be here right now." I muttered something about raccoons, squirrels, the roof, maybe, warping under temperature changes. But the footsteps didn't sound like animals. They sounded deliberate. Human. Day 7, I emailed a roofer. He ghosted me. I wasn't surprised. The guy seemed checked out on the phone, kept calling me buddy. Said if there was no interior attic, there wasn't much to check. Maybe next week. The night was warmer than usual. I cracked the kitchen window to let air in. Around 2 a.m. I woke up to a strange smell, musty and thick, like dirt soaked in breath. I stood in the hallway, half asleep, and realized the hallway light was flickering. Then the ceiling groaned again. This time, I followed it. Each creak moved along the ceiling, starting over the living room, crawling toward the bedroom, slow and dragging. I crept behind it in stocking feet, feeling every vibration in the old wooden floor. I whispered, "What the hell are you?" No answer. Just the long, bending sigh of aged beams under pressure. Then the footsteps stopped, directly above me, above my bed. Day 10, I tried to rationalize it. I even downloaded a white noise app, but nothing helped. The footsteps came every night. Same time, 3:17 a.m., like clockwork. I stopped sleeping. I started noticing other things. The hallway vent, it was blowing cold air, even though the heater hadn't clicked on. The smell was worse now, like mildew and something coppery beneath it. The crack in the ceiling, wider. Dust fell from it when I slammed the front door too hard one afternoon. I ran my hand along the ceiling again, pressing gently around the crack. The drywall gave a little, something moved behind it, just a brief twitch, like a shift, a breath. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. Jesus. Silence. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I even tell? I hadn't spoken to anyone besides clients and the grocery store clerk in weeks. Day 12. The footsteps changed. They were faster now, closer together. Lighter, almost excited. That night, I was lying on the couch again when the sound started earlier. 2:57 a.m., I froze. Tap, 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 drag. I stared at the ceiling. This time, I saw dust fall. A few lazy specks drifting down, catching the light of the street lamp through the curtains. Then the hallway light shut off by itself, and I heard a whisper. Right behind me, my own voice, breathy and low, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, nothing, no open windows, no breeze, no one in the house, but the whisper hung in the air like fog. Day 13 today, I finally went outside and walked the perimeter of the house. The roof is steep, with no external ladder, no easy access. The crawl space beneath the shingles was sealed. At least, it should have been. Near the back corner, just behind the bedroom, I saw it. A square cut into the wood. Crude, not part of the original construction. Hidden behind a drain pipe, a hatch, my breath caught. I touched the edge of the hatch and felt it shift, as if it had been opened recently. Inside was only darkness. And the smell, wet, rotting wood, earth, breath. I slammed it shut. I haven't slept since. After finding that hidden hatch in the back corner of the roof, I knew I couldn't just ignore it, but I still told myself, there's a perfectly rational explanation. Maybe some previous owner left an old crawl space up there. Maybe an animal got trapped. Maybe the house is just really old and full of weird quirks. Still, the footsteps got worse. Now, they didn't just happen around 3:17 a.m. They started earlier, sometimes late at night, sometimes past midnight. I stopped keeping track because every night was the same nightmare. Last night was the worst. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling at the faint crack when I heard it. Slow, heavy footsteps above me. Then a soft dragging sound. The floor vibrated slightly with each step, like the house was breathing. The crack in the ceiling seemed wider, small flakes of plaster falling down onto my chest. I sat up, my heart pounding. "Who's there?" I whispered, voice hoarse. No answer, only silence. I tried to sleep, but the whispers started again. "You shouldn't be here, this time, not my voice." Something else. I got up and grabbed my phone. Called the only person I trusted, my neighbor Gary. Gary's a retired cop who lives 3 houses down. I told him everything. His voice was calm. "Man, that sounds like old house stuff. But if you want, I can come by tomorrow. Check things out." I hung up feeling a little less alone. Next day, Gary showed up with a flashlight and a toolbox. We climbed on the roof together. Gary inspected the shingles, the gutters, and finally, the hatch. He pulled it open with a grunt. Inside, a narrow crawl space, dark and cramped. The smell hit me first, old wood, damp earth, and something else, like stale breath. Gary shined his light inside, blankets, torn and dirty, scratched words on the wooden planks. "Let me out." I swallowed hard. "Someone lived here?" Gary shook his head. "Looks like someone trapped themselves in. Or was trapped." He pointed to a crude charcoal drawing on the wood, a figure lying in bed, eyes wide open, Beneath it, a signature, my name. My blood ran cold. I laughed, bitter and hollow. This isn't funny. Gary's eyes narrowed. He pulled out his phone. Check this out. He showed me a security feed from the neighbor's nest cam, timestamp. 3:17 a.m., a shadowy figure climbs through the hatch, slow, deliberate. It pauses on the roof, looks down, then climbs inside. It never climbs back out. That night, I didn't sleep. Or maybe I did. I can't remember. When I woke, my phone was missing. The hatch was closed, and I heard the footsteps again. I'm not sure when exactly I stopped sleeping. Maybe it was the night after Gary showed me that security footage, the grainy black and white video that made my skin crawl. That shadow climbing through the roof hatch. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a hallucination. It was there, and somehow it was me. I sat in the dark living room that night, gripping a cold cup of black coffee I'd long since stopped tasting. The bitter sludge just sat heavy in my stomach. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but my phone wasn't where I left it. I tore the apartment apart, retracing my steps from the night before. No sign of it. No calls, no texts, just gone. I felt it first, a subtle vibration under my feet. Like the house was alive, breathing through the old floorboards. Then the footsteps came back, thud, 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 slow, deliberate. Heavy, right above my bed, I lay flat, heart hammering, eyes fixed on the ceiling crack that had grown wider over the past week. And then I heard it, a voice. Whispers. My own voice, but empty, cold. Thank you for letting me grieve for her. My breath hitched. I scrambled out of bed and looked up at the ceiling. The crack was crumbling, tiny bits of plaster falling like dust. And then the hand appeared, pale, thin fingers curling through the gap. I stumbled back, heart in my throat. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The hand withdrew. And then, out of the hatch, it crawled. The figure slid down into the room. It was me, but not me. The eyes were hollow pits of black. The smile stretched too wide, twisted and cruel. You didn't grieve. I did. I don't know how I didn't lose it then. The rational part of me fought to keep control, to tell myself it was a nightmare, that exhaustion was playing tricks on me, but it was real, and it knew things. Things only I knew. The next day I called Gary, voice shaky. Dude, you gotta come back. He showed up in 20 minutes, flashlight in hand. I pointed to the ceiling hatch. He looked up, then down at the floor, then back at me. You've gotta call the cops, he said, but my phone's gone. He frowned, pulling out his own phone. Use mine. The police took my statement, searched the apartment. They found the crawl space behind the hatch, blankets. The scratched words, let me out. The drawing of me sleeping, all exactly as Gary and I saw it. No forced entry. No sign anyone else had been living in the house, except, well, that space. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. One of them told me, sometimes old houses hide secrets. Sometimes people don't want to be found. I nodded, too tired to argue. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept hearing the footsteps above me and that whispering voice. I spent the night sitting in the living room, listening. When morning came, I called a roofing inspector. The guy climbed up, looked around. His face went pale. He pointed to a spot behind the hatch where the wood looked recently disturbed. Did someone seal someone up here? He asked. I could only shake my head. Eventually, I packed up and left. I'm living with a friend now, somewhere far from that house. But sometimes, in the quiet, I swear I hear the footsteps. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I catch a glimpse of that hollow smile, and I wonder if that thing in the crawl space wasn't just a figure. Maybe it was a part of me, the part I buried deep, the part that refused to grieve. The part that stayed behind, trapped in the ceiling, taking over when I couldn't bear the pain. So if you ever hear footsteps above your head in the dead of night, maybe don't try to prove it's nothing, because sometimes denial isn't just in your mind. Asterisk. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their sterile glare barely piercing the thick monotony of the office. Desks stretched in endless rows, punctuated by half-empty coffee cups, flickering monitors, and the low hum of tired conversations. The building itself, a glass and steel monolith on the edge of downtown, felt like a tomb. Vanessa sat at her cubicle, staring at the same spreadsheet for the 4th hour, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as a knot tightened in her stomach. She was new here, one of the many faces swallowed whole by the giant corporate merger that had consumed her former company. The buzzword synergy had been thrown around like a mantra, but Vanessa knew it meant something else. Uncertainty, endless performance reviews, a silent but constant pressure to prove she belonged. Her coworker, Mike, popped his head over the divider. "Hey, Vanessa, you heard about the corporate ghost, right?" His voice dropped conspiratorially, even though they were surrounded by busy cubicles. Vanessa blinked, uncertain if he was joking. "Corporate ghost? Yeah, they say it's the ghost of Arthur Reynolds, the old executive who vanished right after the last merger. No one ever saw him leave the building. Rumor is his soul haunts these halls, and if you screw up, well, you might be next." Mike's grin was nervous, a little too eager. Vanessa laughed softly, brushing it off. But as the days passed, strange things started happening. Faint whispers in the air when no one was near, shadows moving just outside her peripheral vision, the cold drafts that snuck through the building's vents despite the sweltering summer heat outside. She shared the story with Leopold, her project lead, and one of the few familiar faces in this new, alien place. He shrugged it off with a half-smile, but didn't seem entirely convinced himself. "You're working yourself too hard," he said. "The stress gets to everyone." But Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling. It was as if unseen eyes were tracking her every move, waiting for her to falter. One evening, the office had emptied early after a power outage. Vanessa was still there, trying to finish an impossible report. The silence was oppressive. Then, faintly, she heard a voice, almost a whisper, coming from the wall behind her desk. Not good enough. She spun around, but no one was there. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. The next morning, she found a post-it note stuck to her monitor. In neat, precise handwriting, it read, "Deadlines are not suggestions." Her skin prickled. Vanessa tore the post-it from her monitor, crumpling it in her fist. Her breath came quick, shallow. Who had left that? No one in the office was supposed to be here this late. The power outage should have emptied the building, locked down every floor. She told herself it was a prank. Some coworker messing with the newbies. But as she slid back into her chair, the quiet thickened, like the walls themselves were listening. The hum of the air conditioning shifted, low and uneven. Then, faintly, that whisper again, "Not good enough." Her eyes darted to the dark vent above her cubicle. The office was colder here than usual, a biting draft creeping down her neck. Goosebumps rose on her arms. Vanessa rubbed them away and forced herself to focus on the glowing screen. The spreadsheet blinked with red errors, corrections she was sure she'd fixed. She hadn't. A cold sweat broke out across her forehead. She shut the laptop, heart hammering, and looked around the empty floor. The echo of her own breathing sounded wrong, like it didn't belong to her. Was she imagining things? Stress? Sleep deprivation? Her phone buzzed, a message from Leopold. Working late again. Don't burn out, Vanessa typed back. I'm fine, just tired. She should have gone home. But she stayed, her fingers trembling as she opened the file again. Over the next days, the whispers grew more frequent, more distinct. They spoke secrets about coworkers she barely knew, private arguments, hidden failures, fears whispered behind closed doors. The voices seemed to know everything, feeding Vanessa a twisted kind of gossip that no one else could hear. She tried to tell Mike, then Leopold, but their faces closed off, dismissive. Stress is making you paranoid, Mike said, avoiding her gaze. Leopold gave her a tired look. Vanessa, focus on your work. Don't feed into office rumors. But the voices didn't care about her denial. They bled into her thoughts, growing louder when deadlines loomed, louder when she made a mistake. One night, she caught herself staring into the reflection of the darkened conference room window. Her face stared back, but the eyes, they seemed different, hollow, watching her. A shiver crawled down her spine. Vanessa's world narrowed. She stopped answering texts, stopped going out. The office became her entire existence. She worked faster, harder, but every success was met with another impossible task, whispered threats, unseen eyes. Her reflection in the window once smiled back at her. But it wasn't her smile. Days bled into nights, and Vanessa's world shrank until the office's cold fluorescent glow was the only constant. The whispers had stopped being background noise. Now they were demands, commands that wrapped around her mind like chains. They spoke of failure, betrayal, and doom with such certainty that resistance felt futile. One evening, she found herself standing before the large glass wall of the CEO's office. The room was empty, lights off, but she swore she saw a shadow move just beyond the frosted glass. Heart pounding, she reached out to touch the cold surface, and a voice, low and gravelly, breathed into her ear. You're next. She spun around. No one. Only the empty corridor stretching back to her cubicle, silent but suffocating. Sleep became a memory. Vanessa's eyes grew sunken. Her hands trembled as she typed reports she barely remembered writing. She tried to speak with HR, to explain the voices, the shadows, the creeping dread that seeped into every corner of her mind. But they looked at her like she was unstable, a risk to the company. Leopold, who had once seemed like an anchor, now avoided her. You're falling apart, he said once, voice flat. Maybe you need a break. But Vanessa couldn't step away. The work was endless, the expectations impossible. And the ghost, if it was even real, was watching, waiting. One night, alone in the office, she stared into her reflection in the black screen of her laptop. The face looking back was hers, but the eyes were cold, empty. She blinked. The eyes blinked back first. A sharp knock echoed from the walls. No, inside the walls, like someone trapped beneath the concrete, scratching, desperate. Vanessa's breath hitched. She knew, deep down, this wasn't just stress or imagination anymore. It was something darker, a corporate nightmare born from greed, ambition, and the crushing weight of expectations. Weeks later, Vanessa resigned. No dramatic confession, no ghostly apparitions caught on camera. Just a quiet email and a few whispered rumors in the break room. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the office sits empty and the lights flicker just so, the cleaning staff swear they hear faint whispers behind the walls, secrets told to no one, secrets that don't want to be forgotten. And those who stay, they know to never, ever fail. After Vanessa handed in her resignation, a heavy silence settled over her life. The relief was immediate, but complicated freedom from the toxic environment came with a gnawing uncertainty. She wasn't haunted by ghosts, but by the memories of relentless pressure and whispered judgments that had gnawed at her confidence for months. The corporate ghost had never been more than a rumor, a personification of the impossible demands and cold corporate machinery that chewed people up and spat them out. Vanessa found herself replaying every late night spent alone in the office, every dismissive glance from management, and every whispered comment behind her back. It was all too real, the exhaustion, the isolation, the fear of failure. She realized that what she had experienced wasn't paranormal, but a deep, grinding psychological toll exacted by the relentless pace and merciless culture of the corporate world. Her sleep returned slowly, but nightmares lingered, not of specters, but of unfinished projects, endless emails, and the hollow silence of her cubicle after everyone else had gone home. Therapy helped, giving her tools to untangle reality from the creeping anxiety that had taken root in her mind. She wasn't broken, just overwhelmed. Months later, Vanessa took a different job, smaller, quieter, with clearer boundaries and more respect for human limits. The office still buzzed with whispers, gossip, rumors, office politics, but none that threatened her sanity. And when she caught her reflection in the mirror now, she saw herself, tired, yes, but resilient. No ghost could claim her, only she could decide her fate. I never thought a simple blackout could become the most terrifying night of my life. It started on a regular Friday evening. I was alone in my apartment, winding down after a long day. My name is Bobby, and I live in a modest building in the middle of town. Nothing fancy, nothing old or creepy. Just an ordinary guy with a dull routine, trying to get through life. Maybe that's why what happened felt so surreal, because I wasn't prepared for it. The power outage struck suddenly, with no warning. One moment the room was bathed in the cold, artificial glow of my living room lights. The next, I was plunged into a darkness so thick it felt almost physical. I flicked my flashlight on instinct, the beam cutting through the blackness like a knife. The hum of electronics died. The world outside was eerily silent, but then something strange happened. Even though the lights were completely out, dead, like someone had flipped the world's main switch, my old TV, an ancient box model sitting in the corner flickered on all by itself. The screen buzzed to life with static, the dull white noise filling the silence. I froze. My heart thudded loud in my chest, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The TV wasn't plugged into a power backup or generator, or at least none that I knew about. How was this even possible? The air felt charged with an unnatural electricity. The glow from the TV cast long, jittery shadows against the walls, and the static flickered like ghostly fireflies. I don't know why I didn't just run. Maybe it was curiosity, or that strange blend of fear and fascination that keeps you frozen in horror movies. The buzzing from the TV was almost hypnotic, like a distorted lullaby pulling me closer. That was when I heard it, beneath the static, beneath the crackling hiss, faint voices. Distorted and broken, but unmistakably voices. Sometimes soft whispers, sometimes low groans, sometimes a hurried, panicked breath. They didn't form words I could understand, at least not at first. but I could feel the dread beneath them like an icy hand squeezing my ribs. I moved closer, holding the flashlight steady now on the screen, trying to make out shapes or faces. And then, for a brief moment, the static cleared enough for me to see something, a flicker of a figure. A silhouette standing just behind the screen, not quite visible but definitely there. The TV buzzed louder, the voices growing more urgent. My breath hitched. I tried to turn the TV off, fumbling for the remote on the floor. But the power buttons did nothing. The TV's glow pulsed on like a heartbeat, alive, relentless. The darkness in the room felt heavier, thick, with an invisible presence. The usual comforting silence was replaced by the flicker and hum of the screen, the distorted voices weaving into my ears, twisting into something worse. I knew then, this wasn't just a power outage. Something else was happening, something that fed on the darkness. I don't remember when the rational part of me started to slip away. The hours stretched into a nightmare blur. I sat, paralyzed, watching the TV. Flicker and pulse, the voices sometimes forming barely audible pleas, sometimes agonized cries that made my skin crawl. I tried calling for help. My phone was dead. The outage must have killed cell towers too. No signal, no service, just silence on the other end. It was like I was trapped inside a broken bubble where nothing worked but the TV and its twisted broadcast. As I sat there, I began to notice other things. The air was colder, but not just normal cold. It was the kind that bites into your bones, the kind you only feel when something unseen is watching you. The flashlight flickered sporadically, like the batteries were dying, or the darkness itself was fighting against the light. I could hear faint rustling in the shadows, maybe the curtains moving, maybe something else. I caught glimpses of shapes shifting in the corners of my vision, always just out of reach, always disappearing when I tried to focus. The room, my sanctuary, felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind outside became a threat. I tried to reason with myself. "It's just your mind playing tricks," I whispered into the dark, trying to stay sane. "There's a logical explanation. Maybe a short circuit caused the TV to flicker on. Maybe the voices are just interference from a nearby radio." But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. Hours passed. I lost track of time. The TV's glow became a sickly beacon, the static pulses now almost rhythmic, like it was breathing in sync with me. The voices grew louder, more frantic. I began to hear my own name whispered softly in the static. "Bobby, Bobby." A sudden rush of cold air blew through the room, making the flashlight beam shake violently. I turned toward the window, expecting to see the open sky or a passing car's headlights. But there was nothing. Just pure darkness swallowing everything outside. I stumbled back toward the TV, and then I saw it, on the screen, beyond the flickering static, a face. Pale, distorted, eyes black holes staring right at me. It wasn't just a reflection or a trick of light. It was watching me, alive somehow. I screamed and slammed my hand onto the TV. Screen, and the image shattered like broken glass, the static exploding into a violent hiss. The TV flickered off abruptly, leaving me in total darkness. I thought it was over. But then, just as I reached for the door, the lights flickered back on. The hum of electricity returned to my apartment, and the world seemed normal again, except my TV was off, silent, unplugged, and the room smelled faintly of burnt wires and something else. Something metallic. I left my apartment that night and never looked back. Days later, I checked the news. The blackout had hit most of the city, but curiously, certain pockets had power. Mine was one of the rare spots completely dark except for my TV's inexplicable glow. Electrical engineers were baffled. Theories ranged from freak electrical surges to more conspiratorial murmurs about energy anomalies and electromagnetic disturbances. I tried to tell people about the voices, the face in the screen, but no one believed me. Some called it sleep paralysis, some said it was stress. Maybe they were right, or maybe some dark force had found a way to seep through the cracks of reality, using the city's power grid as a doorway. Now, every time there's a flicker of static on my screen, I freeze. I wonder if it's still watching, waiting, ready to come back through the glowing glass and into my world again. The morning, I found the first note was like any other in my quiet routine. I'm Mary Kay, 32, an average woman trying to make her way in the corporate world. My job at the marketing firm downtown wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I liked my coworkers enough, and the office itself was just that, an ordinary building with gray walls and buzzing fluorescent lights. That Thursday morning, I was running late. My usual cup of coffee had spilled in the car, my boss had called unexpectedly, and my mind was already tangled in deadlines. I didn't even notice the small envelope until I slid open my desk drawer to grab my planner. There it was, an ivory envelope, plain except for neat handwriting spelling out my name. Curious, I pulled it out. Inside was a single folded note. The handwriting was elegant, almost familiar. I saw you arrive this morning. You looked tired. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. At first, I thought maybe it was a prank from a coworker, but no one seemed to be paying attention. I looked up, scanning the room filled with familiar faces typing away, engrossed in their work. No one made eye contact. Was someone watching me? The idea unsettled me more than I expected. Tom sat across from me, fiddling with his pen. He was my closest colleague and the only person I trusted here. In his early 30s, Tom had been with the company longer than I had. Quiet, unassuming, but sharp. I showed him the note during lunch break. Probably just a prank, he shrugged. Someone trying to mess with you? I forced a laugh, but my gut told me otherwise. I don't know, I whispered. It feels off. That night, I lay awake, wondering who could have sent it. The office was locked after hours and security was tight. Someone would have to sneak in. I told myself it was nothing, but unease settled deep in my chest. The next morning, I found another note in the same place. Your coffee was too strong today. You frowned when you took the first sip. My breath caught. I had never told anyone how particular I was about my coffee. Who was this? But it wasn't just words. Nestled beside the note was a small pressed flower, purple, delicate, like it had been picked recently. I stared at it, fingers trembling. There was no signature, no clue. Over the next week, the notes became more frequent. Each one referenced tiny, personal details. You hum Yellow Submarine when you're nervous? I like that. You wince when the elevator jerks. It reminds you of childhood car rides. Small gifts appeared too, a torn piece of fabric matching a scarf I wore once, a ticket stub from my favorite cafe. The messages were intimate, unsettlingly so. I started noticing subtle signs, chairs scraping softly when the office was empty, a faint scent of lilacs lingering near my desk, the perfume my mother used to wear, shadows shifting just beyond my vision. One afternoon, I swore I saw a figure in a dark corner, but when I blinked, it was gone. I felt trapped in a cage of paranoia. My phone's battery drained faster than usual. Sometimes my computer screen flickered and showed random images, fleeting glimpses of faces I couldn't place. The whispers began late one night. I was working late, the office mostly empty except for the janitor in the hall. Suddenly, a soft voice called my name, not from behind, but inside my head. I froze, my heart thundered. The lights flickered, and the screen flashed distorted faces and crawling shadows. I bolted out. For days, I avoided the office after dark. I told my manager, but she dismissed it as stress or overwork. I wanted to believe her. One day, I found an old rusty key in my drawer with a note. This unlocks what you fear most. I searched for a lock it might fit. Finally, behind the supply room, a small closet door caught my eye. The key turned easily. Inside was darkness, musty and damp. A flickering light revealed a small monitor. It showed a live feed of my desk, a hidden camera. My breath caught someone had been watching me. Every move on the screen, a shadow moved behind me. I spun around. No one. The notes escalated. "You're not alone, Mary Kay. I've always been here." I started doubting myself. The isolation was suffocating. Each day I arrived, anxiety knotted in my stomach. Footsteps followed me in empty halls. One evening, I stayed late to finish a project. The office was silent except for the tapping of my keyboard. Suddenly, footsteps, heavy, slow, approached. I looked up, no one, then a whisper, soft but chilling. "Mary Kay." It wasn't outside my head anymore. The last note came printed, cold and impersonal. "You can't escape me." I quit the job the next day, moved to a small town far away.